Hey guys, welcome to the G.O.A.T pod. We are so glad that you are joining us for the first time. Hopefully, you listened to our little voicemail teaser recording, and we're excited for this first podcast. But in case you didn't, this is a podcast where we are reviewing a lot of the most sold albums of all time. We're starting with a Wikipedia list, starting at the bottom of the 30 million sold. If you go and look at that. And we're not doing any compilations, but we're working up from there all the way to the most sold album of all time according to Wikipedia. But let's get started. I want to introduce everybody that is here on this podcast, and I have one special question for each of them. First, Jarrett, thank you for leading us in many ways with this podcast, but I want to start with, what was your most listened to artist this year, Jarrett Slusher?
Oh man. Well, hey, yeah, my name is Jarrett. You heard me in the intro, and my top artist for this year was Linkin Park.
Sick. That's
Whoa,
sick.
that's dope.
I was actually not expecting that. So Jared and I have been friends for quite many years, and I had a few guesses in my head, but Linkin Park was not it.
Yeah,
So
they had the Meteora 20th anniversary thing come out this year, so that put them up at top. What did
that
you
makes
think it was
sense.
going to be?
I was thinking, well, I generally think it's going to be like Colony House,
Okay.
but I was thinking this year might have been Metallica
Oh, okay. Interesting.
because you were talking about it back in the summer some.
Oh, that's
So
right. Yeah, I haven't really listened to their new album a whole lot, but yeah, Linkin Park
cool.
number one for
All
me.
right, Steven, Mr. Shot, what was your top artist of the year?
My top artist, and I think Jared could probably guess it if he wanted to, but
Wait, do
my
it.
top
Guess
was
first. Guess first.
I'm gonna guess Radiohead.
that is 100% correct.
That's
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah, Radiohead was my top artist. I think the top song was Jigsaw Falling Into Place. All
Okay.
5 top songs were Radiohead, I think. I
Nice.
got
That's
kind of
awesome.
obsessed this year.
From different albums or all the same album?
From different albums.
Cool.
There's some from Kid A, some from the Rainbow album. You know, there's a lot of them.
Sweet. All right, Daniel Brown. What
Daniel
was
Brown, the one
what
with the
was yours?
hair, the one older than the other one. My top. Well, does anybody have a guess on what my top artist was?
Zendaya.
Nickelback.
Not Zendaya.
I'm gonna
Not
guess
Nickelback.
it's some kind of a cappella group, but I don't know which one.
You're
Straight No
correct.
Chaser.
It was a cappella, and it was Pentatonics.
I was gonna guess.
Did I
that 'cause
expect
you
that?
went
No,
to-
I really didn't expect that. But
Well, was it because you
here
went
we
to the
are.
concert?
It might have been. You
And you
know,
were like,
after the
"Oh, yeah."
concert, listening to it a whole lot more.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
most
my
likely.
wife had Ed Sheeran on her list, which that surprised her. But we saw him in concert in August, so
That's the thing.
makes sense.
Spotify knows,
They
and
know. Well,
they just track our patterns.
Yeah.
or our patterns track us. Who knows?
Jason, what was yours? Did you say?
I had not said, and it is because I went to their concert. So I'm gonna let Jarrett or any of y'all could guess, but I think Jarrett might be able to guess it.
Oh, is it? Oh my gosh, I forgot their names. It's that group of females, right?
No, they were in my top 5. They hit
Okay.
number 5. Truesdale. Go give them a listen.
Yeah.
They did hit my top 5. My ladies.
I
Love
kept
me
wanting
some
to say
Truesdale.
Laurel, but that's not the name of a group, and it's
Yeah.
someone I know.
Well, now, so my top one, I saw them in New York right before their album release, and it was the band Camino.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
very
right.
nice.
And I've just been streaming the band Camino's new album constantly before and after that concert. Well, technically I couldn't do it before because they hadn't released it yet. But after it came out, I was all in. So yeah, that was me. All right.
Nice.
Thank you for like getting us in. I think we can see a lot of where our personalities come from what we listen to most. But I know leading up to this week, we've listened to a lot of the Beatles' Abbey Road album, which is the first album we will get into. So
Yeah.
let's start with some background info. Jarrett, give us some background on the Beatles and Abbey Road.
Yeah, so the Beatles really need no introduction, and most of you who are listening to this podcast probably already know who they are. But in case you don't know who they are and you stumbled upon this podcast and you're like, who are the Beatles? They are, in no particular order, Ringo Starr, George Harrison, John Lennon, and Paul McCartney. And
That order seemed very particular.
Yeah.
Why,
because
why would
people always
anyone
put
start with
people
Ringo
always put
Starr?
Ringo last, and I was like,
Yeah, I
not
know.
this time.
Not today.
I
So, but
appreciate it.
a group of lads from Liverpool, and let me just stumble on that on this podcast. But
You
Liverpool,
almost had a
and
really good British accent there.
thank you. I haven't worked on it whatsoever, but sometimes accidentally I can be really good at something. But yeah, so they're from Liverpool, great UK town, fishing town, and got really famous in the early '60s. And so at this point in their career, they are recording what is their final album together. It's not their last album that was released, but it's the last one they recorded together under their producer, George Martin, who was with them from the very beginning. So from the time they released their first album all the way to now, he's been with them. And
Awesome.
of course, they're recording. And any guesses as to where they're recording this album?
Dude, I have no idea. That was sarcastic. That was supposed to be sarcasm for those.
Penny Lane.
Penny Lane.
Abbey Road.
Close. It's actually EMI Studios, but because of how popular this album got, it has now been renamed Abbey Road Studios.
Because it is on Abbey Road. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's on Abbey Road. So after this, it was EMI Studios. After this album, became Abbey Road Studios, and
Cool.
in the year 1969.
Nice.
But they're recording this album. So again, it's the last one. What happened before this album was they lost their manager, Brian Epstein, and they're kind of figuring out, okay, well, we're a band now. We don't have a manager, but what do we do? So let's manage ourselves. Let's just do whatever we want and go from there. And so they had the White Album, 1968. And right after that, they went into a period of wanting to record, but not in such a way that was heavily produced. They wanted to do something more stripped back and more like roots rock, like what they were doing their first few albums. And that we know that as the Get Back sessions. So the song Get Back and Don't Let Me Down came from these sessions. But ultimately, that album did not come out in 1969, and so they decided to just let that be. And then they were like, let's make one more album.
That's good. That's good.
Just make one more album, and this was it. Because yeah, that's right.
Sweet. That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's it's crazy that this ends up where it is in this album listing, being the last recorded one. But I think we'll see why as we go through these tracks. So let me give us a little list of the tracks that are covered on this album, and then we'll get into a little bit of analysis. So this album begins. It was recorded on vinyl. So we have an A side and a B side. And so it begins with Come Together, moves into Something. Then we have the song that's been stuck in my head all day, Maxwell Silver Hammer, and Oh Darling, Octopus's Garden, I Want You, She's So Heavy. Here Comes the Sun, starts the B side, followed by Because. And then we have a medley. It begins with You Never Give Me Your Money. It runs through Sun King, Mean Mr. Mustard, I always pronounce this one. Someone pronounce this. I'm gonna get it wrong.
Polythene Pam.
Polythene Pan. And then we got She Came Through the Bathroom Window, Golden Slumbers, Carry the Weight in the End. And then we find one last sort of hidden track known as Her Majesty, which is real short but real sweet too. I thought it was a really neat way for them to finish this album.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
through all of these,
I'm glad you. I mean, I wrote it down, but I'm glad you mentioned it. That Here Comes the Sun starts side B, because a lot of people listen to it like you're probably listening to us right now on Spotify. Just listen on Spotify. You go right out of I Want You straight into Here Comes the Sun. You're like, man, that was a bit of a jump. But if you have, the original record, I Want You ends abruptly, and that's the end of side A. So then you'd have to get up, flip the record over, and then you start with Here Comes the Sun. So it's not quite as, not as big a jump.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a neat thing that as we were going to see some newer albums that were not written per se for vinyl, um, as these older ones are. You'll see the way they list their tracks becomes a little different because it makes sense to hit it hard, with Here Comes the Sun in the way it does to begin a new side of an album in the same way that you wouldn't need to, like on the new Band Camino's album or on any of the Jesse albums by Jacob Collier. Like your way of functioning is not thinking about, oh, we got a flip side at this
Yeah.
point. So that's neat. All right, let's get into some lyrics and themes. What do y'all got? What's some interesting things, some uh things that stood out to y'all throughout this album?
So it's the Beatles, so everything's super uh like psychedelic and positive, which I really like. But there's also just random edgy lyrics um in the midst of like something that's goofy uh or really psychedelic. Like I'm looking at Maxwell's Silver Hammer. The chorus ends with bang bang. Maxwell's silver hammer made sure that she was dead,
Yeah.
which was I'm not sure uh, what what was meant by these lyrics, but kind of some gruesome imagery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in a song that musically it's so da 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 da.
Yeah, it
Like,
makes it that much more terrifying.
yeah. It's a wild lyric that is not expected, but isn't unrelatable. And like it's a weird thing that I think the Beatles do is they write these lyrics that I was like, I have no way of relating to that, but I relate to
Yeah.
it completely at the same time. Um, yeah, it's something a part of their genius in their songwriting.
Yeah.
Got to give it up to Johnny Lynn Boy. So
Is that
Yeah,
what
I
they
know.
call?
that's what we're going with.
Johnny
Okay.
Lynn Boy. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Once that song dropped, every person named Joan uh, really disliked hammers.
Even more so.
There's a lot of, I mean, it's a lot of storytelling.
Yeah.
Every single one of these that has some form of person or character, like it's telling a story like throughout, whether it's describing an emotion and their relation to the emotion, like whether or not we can understand it, there's a story being told, and the music lends itself well to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think of it until now, but just about every song has like exactly what you're saying, some kind of story like come together, like starts off here come a flat top, and then something starts with something in the way she moves, like it's and then Maxwell Silver, like everything's like in third person until oh darling. But it's like, yeah, everything has like some kind of main character, whether that's the main singer or someone's being described. And it'd be really interesting if you made it about, if you listen to this album and you're like, oh man, this is all the same character. That would be a wild story.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I think there's something interesting, and I think we're gonna notice this on more albums as we move through. But a lot of these top sold albums, like they tell a story that almost feels similar to like old operas. If you've gotten into like the storytelling in operas, like there's some wild stories, but they're put to music that makes them palatable,
Hmm.
but not like in the way that Maxwell Silver Hammer. It's like obviously that statement is so drastically different from the music, like what you would expect. But in similar ways, if you listen to like musicals like Sweeney Todd,
Hmm.
you have some really like kind of gruesome type like language that's being talked of, but they put it to music that both fits the story but makes it palatable and listenable and like draws you in to want to hear what comes
Yeah.
next.
Mm.
All right, anything else on themes or lyrics for this one?
What
If
do you guys
not,
think of Octopus's Garden?
I find it really funny how Yellow Submarine came only like 3 years earlier from this, and
yeah.
then that wasn't even written by Ringo. That was Lennon McCartney, and then Ringo's like, ah, here's a song. It's like a sequel, Octopus's Garden.
Yeah. No, I think it's the same thing. Like a lot of these songs, I listen to them. I'm like, man, I relate so much. And then I think back on the lyrics. I'm like, I don't relate to that at all. But they wrote it in such a way that I just like I felt drawn in. I felt like I was a part of it. To
Yeah,
the
Yeah,
way
like
that their
if you
lyrics.
focus on what the lyrics are saying literally, they're just nonsensical. But if you
yeah,
focus on how the lyrics make you feel, then they're very relatable.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just watched a Mark Rober video about his pet octopus, and so realistically, an octopus's garden is under the water in like a coral reef, and the octopus is probably, camouflaged, ready to attack you. But in this song, that's not at all the feeling I get. I'd
Yeah.
rather,
Yeah.
be in the shade and just chill out and relax and, just let things happen and see what the world does. And so yeah, it's just one of the things where you get encapsulated in the music and like the feels.
Yeah. No, I think that's sweet. Let's hop over into some like and this is a term that I keyed just a few minutes ago. Musical needities. They're not oddities. They're needities.
Ah,
And so yeah, so you see
Oh.
where we get there. Um, let me toss it first to Dan. I know you were mentioning some neat things that you found in the way that they
Yeah.
wrote their music.
So there, I was doing some research on the album, and there was an article that I came across. It was a doctoral dissertation by one Patrick Gutman out of California. He's got a PhD in music composition, and his dissertation was on Abbey Road. And
That's sweet.
one of the first things that I was reading through, I'll read just a little blip of this
mm,
that I found fascinating. Um, So, on the local level, there are several instances where a song on the album modulates to another key that is in the third or that is a third away. One example of this can be seen in the song Something, where the music begins in the key of C major and modulates to the key of A major, only to return back to C major for the final verse. This movement of a third between keys in the same song appears in You Never Give Me Your Money, Sun King, She Came In Through the Window, Carry That Weight, and The End.
That's
The
cool.
relationship of a third is heightened in the medley, which consists, Jason had described that before, on both the local and macro level, where the two keys, A major and C major, seem in constant battle with one another throughout the medley.
That's really
Um,
neat.
hmm,
I, I, Jason and I both studied music in college, and having some of that knowledge and some of that ear training to kind of hear it works. Um, it's cool to hear some of this and say, well, there's something there,
Yeah.
and to see somebody who's taken it a step further and saying, here it is, this is what is causing you to think this way. This and it causes me to want to go back through more
Yeah.
Beatles albums to find this relationship, wondering if
mm,
that's um, part of the key to their success.
Yeah, and I'd love to listen through and see that more because I know when it's especially when staying in major, moving a third is not an easy thing to do and feel
mm,
natural.
yeah,
Correct.
Um, but like you said, like they did it a lot, but
Yes.
you don't ever feel like oh they did a really like oh this just feels uncomfortable. Keep like it
Yeah.
it fits what they were going for.
yeah.
Well, in a very basic music theory sense, transposing down a third and keeping it in major shouldn't work for the ear,
Yeah,
because you're changing the entire key. It's not going to a different mode, like you're completely changing. how the key is structured.
That's really neat. Man,
Yeah.
I wish I'd known that. Now I want to go listen to it again because that's just so neat to pick up on those things.
Hmm. But it was so far a really good read. I'm gonna keep giving it a look. Uh, Patrick Gutman, Abbey Road.
Nice.
I believe it's called "Come Together," a compositional analysis of the Beatles' Abbey Road album.
That's
Thank you,
awesome.
Patrick,
Sweet.
PhD, Dr. Patrick.
Man,
All
that's
right, what do
awesome.
y'all got? Y'all got any others before I ramble?
No,
Ramble away.
I've
Okay,
got nothing.
cool.
Please.
So some of the things that really stood out to me, one is not specifically for this album, but just something that is known in drummers, especially, is the way in which Ringo Starr plays. Um, I actually back in college when I was taking percussion, I was doing a groove on a drum set, not even thinking about it. And my percussion instructor was like, "Why are you playing like Ringo?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, every time you hit the snare, you stop hitting the hi hat." And it's a thing that Ringo did that was really neat, where he would almost emphasize each part of the drum he was playing at each time,
Mm.
rather than playing over itself. Um, and in a lot of cases, if somebody does that and doesn't do it tastefully, it sounds like they're really disjoint and they're not playing the
Mm.
drums well. But Ringo found a way to take his drumming and really highlight the parts of the kit that he wanted to highlight without having any disjointness between the fills that he was doing, and so forth, as he was moving through the song. So you'll notice sometimes, like when he'll go to a fill, like all the other parts, like he's not like playing a crash over the fill at the same time. Sometimes he does, but for the majority, it's like the fill is its own thing and the groove is its own thing. But it doesn't feel out of place in the way he does it. The other thing that's said a lot about Ringo, especially, there's some drummers that are known for being really great at playing the part. There's some drummers that are really great at playing really complex things, and he's known for really playing the song.
Yeah.
And that's something, just musicians in general, I think we can all agree. If you can get beyond playing the part to playing the song on whatever your instrument, um, that's the biggest thing that can take you from like a good artist to like oh my gosh, this guy is incredible.
Mm.
Um, and so throughout all of the parts, I think especially in like Come Together, the way that intro goes, he is playing so much
Yeah.
with the but he doesn't overplay at any point. Like he
Yeah.
plays what fits the song so perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
um and the way he lines up with the bass line, especially,
Mhm.
they do some really neat things where they kind of pass off who's going to take over the rhythmic structure at different points,
Mhm.
where bass is going hard and then drums comes in and goes hard, and they balance to each other like super super well.
Yeah.
So those were a couple of the musical needities that I had. And then the last one is a recording thing. When you record, you're doing all kinds of panning and different things, and obviously they were working probably on a lot of tape decks and a lot of physical. Obviously, we're not using digital recording at that time, but they used panning in such a really neat way, that a lot of times when I'm recording, I don't want to just pan something hard left and have
Mhm.
it only in someone's left ear. But if you listen to this album with like headphones on that are showing your split audio, it's so neat. Like they they throw things all over the place. And if you listen to it on speakers in front of you, you may not notice it. But if you listen to it in headphones, it's so cool. Like it sounds like you're sitting in the middle of the band and they're
Yeah.
playing all around you. And I think that's just a really neat thing that was done to make sure that the balance of the songs were done so well. But also just, I don't know, it made the album feel more alive than I think
Mhm.
some albums can do.
Yeah. I definitely recommend. This is one of those albums where you should definitely like listen to it, but also listen to it with headphones and listen to it when you're not like busy doing something else. Like just listen to the album.
Yeah.
And just to touch real quick on the Ringo thing, I've seen a lot of people like complain about Ringo's drumming, but I think, you know, right to your point, it's one of those things where he is playing the song. He's playing exactly what needs to be done. Like if you listen to I Saw Her Standing There and then go into Come Together, like you wouldn't think, oh, well, this is, of course, it's the same band, or of course, this is the same drummer. Um, you know, it's rock, but it's not the same style, and he's playing exactly what needs to be done. And I'll also say, if you're interested in learning how to play bass, this was a really good album to listen to and find really nice bass parts.
Yeah.
I was inspired as a non bassist by how good Paul was on this album, and just those bass lines that he came up with.
Yeah. No, it's obviously it's sold really well for good reason.
Yeah.
I think that combination of the lyrical genius and the musical aptitude of the whole band just set it above many other things. All right, let's get to some highlights. What were some of y'all's highlights of this album?
I'd say one of my favorite parts was the vocals for "Oh Darling."
Hmm.
Mm,
I'm actually not sure who was the singer on that. Do you guys?
That was Paul.
it was Paul,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yeah. Well, he really rocked up the vocals on that one, and it's at some points I was like, "Am I listening to Led Zeppelin right now?" Because these vocals are banging. But he
Yeah.
had like a lot of like grit and distortion to his singing, which I enjoyed a lot.
Yeah, that's funny you say that because Lennon John really wanted to sing this song and thought he would do a better job. And so in an interview later, he was like, "Yeah, Paul didn't sing that song very well." And they had to do like 4 different takes for him to like get his voice to be able to sound like the way it does. It's the complete opposite of Maxwell Silverhammer because like apparently all of them except for Paul hated that song. Well, I mean, Paul wrote it, and like they hated that song. John didn't even play on it. That was just Paul, Ringo, and George on that one. But then Oh Darling was like, "Oh yeah, we need to like let's do this. I'll sing on it." No, I got it. Oh okay. So, but yeah, I think Paul's really interesting because Paul, like, if you've never listened to the Beatles or never even studied their music, it's you always know when it's John and you can kind of tell when it's George, definitely when it's Ringo. But when it's Paul, he changes his voice on a lot of different songs. Like if you listen to like I Saw Her Standing There and then Lady Madonna and then The Long and Winding Road and Get Back, like those are all 4 different kinds of voicings, but it's all Paul.
That's wild.
That's impressive.
So,
Me and Mr. Mustard was a highlight for me. The just the way it's written, the it's a minute and 6 seconds, but it like captured me when I first listened to it, partially because of Ringo's stellar drumming on it. I mean, like, yeah, Jason said it before. He doesn't add anything that's not necessary. He doesn't take away anything that's gonna be missed. But like, it just, I don't know, it sat really well with me. It stood out when I listened to it through the first time. Just sitting down to specifically listen to this album.
hmm.
And go for it, Jared.
Yeah, I was gonna say before doing this podcast and before listening to it in this kind of way, like on repeat, something was not my favorite song, and I don't think it's necessarily my favorite now, but I definitely in listening to it have more of an appreciation for it, especially knowing just how it's recorded and how it came about. Because this is one of the songs that I was talking about earlier. They had the Get Back sessions in the beginning of 1969, and then they came back, and this is one of the songs that made it out of those sessions. But it's just so awesome and so beautiful, and just like Dan was saying
Mm-hmm.
earlier, it goes from C to A back to C. But even the guitar parts and the bass, like I don't know why younger Jarrett didn't appreciate this song, but he was wrong because this is an awesome song, and it's inspirational, I think. And if you just even if you just listen to the music, like you can go, I think it's on the deluxe version, if you go on Spotify and just listen to the string instrumental and what the orchestra does in the background,
Mm.
it's just man, like I don't even know how to describe it right now, but it's so good.
The bass line to this one is just remarkable
Yeah,
Yeah.
to
yeah.
something.
And I saw there was like an interview where George dictated to Paul what he was supposed to play. And so it's unknown if Paul, like in the recording, if Paul actually did what George said to do, because George wanted it to be simpler. Um, but it's just one of those things where like, you can just imagine George telling Paul, no, don't do that. Make it simpler, Paul.
That's awesome. Well, I was trying to think through a highlight. I think you kind of keyed to it. I think the orchestral arrangements throughout it were just incredible, and
Mhm.
it feels not weird for a rock album because like I think we hear it more often now, but at least at that time, like the orchestral combined with this, I mean, this was crazy music back
Yeah.
in the day. That was making people adults were saying, "Oh, these kids listen to this crazy music," and we listen to it, and it's like, "Oh, this was crazy. Okay, all right."
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that cool combination of such a beautiful and old style, that orchestral music's been around for hundreds of years,
Yeah.
and you layer that with this new kind of hip, if you want to put that term on it, rock music. I thought that was really neat.
Yeah. Yeah, George Martin was a really talented guy in his own right. Apart from just being their producer, because I mean, of course, you've got Sergeant Pepper's, which was it's also on this list, and we'll talk about it. But that's such an obvious, like, oh yeah, rock and orchestra. Okay, well that's already happened. But he was even doing the orchestral production of their like movies when they came out. So like all the orchestral instrumentals for A Hard Day's Night and Help, that was all George Martin. And so then now
That's
here
awesome.
we see it not just like, okay, we have an orchestra song, but it's like actually going along with their instruments as they're playing. And yeah, I think this is just one of those. They definitely didn't set out for this to be a magnum opus, but this is one of those where it's like, oh yeah, like this is the greatest thing that's ever happened, or
Mm.
something like
Yeah,
that. So
sweet. All right, let's move to a great segment: highs and lows, favorites, least favorites, happy crappies, whatever you want to call it. What is your favorite song? And if you have one, you don't have to have one, but you should. What's your favorite song? What's your least favorite song? Let's start with Mr. Steven.
See, my favorite song, I would say, is Because.
Why?
No, just because.
Nice. Good reasons.
No, no. But it's I liked the harmonies and vocals of it is very choral in
Mhm.
some areas, and I had already known this song because one of my favorite artists, Elliott Smith, covered it, um, and he did a great job with it. And I didn't know it was a Beatles cover until uh, a while after listening to it. Um, but I like this one lyrically and musically. It's it stuck with me. I like it.
hmm.
Sweet.
I don't think I have a least favorite. I don't think I could bring myself to deem one of these songs as my least favorite. So I'm gonna pass on
Fair
that.
enough. All right. Well, I'm gonna throw out my favorite was definitely I Want You. I think you'll as we go through this, you will often find that kind of these like banger kind of songs like
Mhm.
I get attracted to often. Every once in a while I'll take a nice sweet song, but these have been catching my fancy recently. So that one is at least my favorite right now. Least favorite, again, it's hard for me to put a least favorite. Um I know some people are gonna hate me. It's probably Octopus's Garden. And I love Star.
Oh
Like
man,
I've talked all day about I love Ringo Starr. The song it's the one that I least relate to, I guess
Hmm.
is the way for me to say it.
You
Of all
obviously have
these,
never played this song on the Beatles Rock Band, and it shows.
well, you're completely correct. So I cannot argue with you there. I will say
Very
this is
specific
not
insult.
high or low. I always forget that Golden Slumbers is a Beatles song, and
Yeah.
it caught me and it threw me back in. If you know, the opening to the movie Sing is
Hmm.
the song, and
The
it like,
animated one?
oh yeah, the animated movie, Koala, getting it, all that good stuff. Freaking Tori Kelly in there as
Hmm.
the elephant, great voices.
Yeah.
Who was the rat? Not the rat, mouse. Um,
Frank Sinatra?
It was, well, yes, but
What?
it was Seth
What?
MacFarlane.
Man, yeah, Seth MacFarlane freaking killed it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we're hyping that movie up too. But yeah, so it threw me because I was listening to it in the car like the first time through again this time, and I got there and I was like, wait, what? I was like, oh wait, this is a Beatles song. That's awesome. So that's
Yeah.
my high and my low and my in between. Jarrett, what's your top? And if you have one, what's your least top?
Yeah, I think top for me is a tie between Something and Oh Darling. Oh Darling has been my favorite from this album since before I even listened to the album. But then after listening to it on repeat now, Something's really got up there, as I talked about earlier. So I'm gonna put it as a tie between those two. Least favorite, I mean I don't really have a least favorite part of the album, but I think if I had to rank it, Because would probably be somewhere down there.
You
But
son of a
That
bitch.
hurts. That hurts. That, man.
but I really do appreciate it. Like it doesn't mean it's bad by any means. It's just like if I had to choose a song to listen to just out of album, you know, con not concept. What's
Outside
the
the
word?
context of the album,
Context.
that's
Yeah, out of the context, I would not choose Because on its own.
that's
But
fair.
within the context, I do enjoy listening to it and I can understand it. And I really do enjoy the triple harmonies with Paul, John, and George,
Yeah.
and the Moog, that Moog keyboard
Moog,
synth in the back.
Hmm.
But yeah, that
Moog.
would be mine.
All right, Dan, what you got?
Oh, Jared, that hurts. That
I'm sorry.
mine would have to be a tie between Because and
Why?
Come Together. Come Together is so, because,
Okay, cool.
uh Come Together is just so, one, it's well known. Like it, you can go anywhere, hear anyone
Come
play it,
together.
and you know what it is. You know who it is, you know where it came from, you know the origin of it. Um and especially, like, given the times that they were in, Come Together was such a desired movement for people to just band together and be
Yeah.
humanity together. Like, I think the significance of it, of its time, of its day, is so good. um it's the opening number. You hear that bass line and you know you're home, like you know where you are.
Yeah.
And because it's in C sharp minor, probably my favorite key of all time. I like it.
Sweet.
Just, you play it and I'm going to love it.
I
Well, then in
play the
that
D
case, it's
flat
not
That's
my least
minor.
favorite anymore.
um
Take it back.
Get
well,
on
and
back.
the intro and guitar, just like it's another one of those. There's a few songs in my life that in my life haha, that um
So good.
that I hear the beginning of and I just go, oh yeah.
Yeah.
And Come Together and Because were the top two of like reactions for me when I was coming back to them or listening to it on shuffle or whatever. um but like, there's so much love for Something, there's so much love for Me, Mr. Mustard, for I Want You,
Carry
for
that
Oh
weight.
Darling, for a lot of
That's a
this
good one.
album, really, for
Yeah.
most of it. I was not a fan of Polythene Pam.
Oh, really?
That was my least favorite
But
of all
she's
the
so
ones
good
on this
looking.
album. I just,
Exactly.
I just didn't. I just, yeah. Um, but
Well,
I'll repeat something that Jason said. I didn't realize Golden Slumbers was attached to the Beatles, and I'd heard it so many different places.
yeah. No,
Um,
if you go
and to
search up
hear where it came
movies and
from,
shows it's in a lot of things.
or even just TikTok,
Yeah.
like Golden Slumbers is all over TikTok.
Yeah.
Um, it's good.
Better than Golden
Yeah,
Hour.
there's
And that's
my
not a hot take.
But there's my happies and
I
crappies.
like it. And for all you Pams out there, I want to apologize on behalf of this pod. We do not reflect the views of 1/4 of this podcast. Sweet. All right, now this is our favorite part. We're gonna have it on all of our episodes, and it is our album ranker. And so we're gonna post this. It's gonna have we're gonna make some sort of a graphic. It'll be cool and hip and all these things. And so being that it's our first album, Jarrett, where does it rank?
I'm gonna have to put this at number 1. I just don't see how
Okay.
we could put it any lower.
So Dan, out of all the albums we've reviewed so far, where are you putting it?
That's really tough. There's been some great contenders and really some ones that stick with you and whatnot. I'd have to say, gosh, it's tough, but this is my favorite by far.
Dude, sweet.
Number 1.
Steven, I think we all know where you already land on this, so we'll go ahead and move along. But
I've been up all night.
no, sorry, I'll let you go. Where would you put it out of all the ones we've done so far?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it, and
Don't think too
stuff,
hard.
and it's woken me up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. But
Really?
I'd probably say it's my favorite.
Wow.
Dude,
That's
I don't
strong.
know how this is probably never going to happen again, but we've all agreed. I'm also going to put this one like honestly,
This
is
probably
incredible.
will never happen again.
It probably will never happen again
In the history of this pod.
in the history of this podcast. But I'm gonna put it first. Now next week,
Man.
who's to say? Who's to say?
Who knows, man?
Who knows? But I think we before we talk about next week, I just want to say thank you so much for listening to this first pod.
Yes.
From the bottom of Jarrett's heart, I just want to give
And
a
the
great
top.
thank you.
Dang.
For listening.
It's a lot
and
of heart.
we're just so excited for all the rest that will come to. Before I say what's next week, anybody got any thank you shout outs or anything else?
Thank you, China.
All right. I think he was talking about the plates and like the dishware. But next week, if you join us again, we will be on the album Dangerous by Michael Jackson. Again, if you're looking for this list, it is found on Wikipedia, and we are so glad that you joined us, and we will see you next time. Thanks. Have a great day.
See ya.